Much Costa from Eclipse Magazine.
And I'm Mike Milinkovich from the Eclipse Foundation.
Hi Mike, great to have you here in Frankfurt for
my
this
pleasure.
demo camp here in Frankfurt. You just had a presentation about some cool end-to-end technologies here from Eclipse.
Yeah, so the demo I did was for machine-to-machine. Some people also know that as Internet of Things, also heard Internet of Everything. So we have a number of projects at Eclipse that are working on the end-to-end space. There's currently 3 that have been going on for a little while. Mahini, which is a Lua framework for building the kind of software that you would put in a gateway for doing an end-to-end application. PAHO, which is MQTT protocol, which is a lightweight pub-sub protocol for collecting data from telemetry data from little sensors. And then Kaneki, which is a Lua development tool and platform for building Lua software, does all the normal things you would expect from an Eclipse development tool. And we actually have 2 other projects that are just getting started. So Ponte is in the proposal phase, and that provides a bridge between REST and sensor kind of protocols like MQTT. So when you build an application, end-to-end application or Internet of Things application, eventually you're going to probably want to have a web UI or a way to interact through standard REST APIs, and Ponte will provide that for you. And then just last week we announced a proposal for the Eclipse SCADA project for doing industrial automation. So that's another one in sort of the same general area of M2M. And yeah, so we're very enthusiastic. I thought you noticed I was with my Arduino and Raspberry Pi and stuff. It's a lot of fun to play with these things, so it's turning into a bit of a hobby for me at home.
Okay, and it's really a growing segment of the Eclipse project portfolio, I think.
So we have with Ponte and SCADA, we now have 5 projects in that area, and there's definitely a couple more coming. So it's definitely a growing area, and I think it's a growing area in the industry. So the Internet of Things is it's going to be huge. And actually, I'm personally very happy to have these projects come into Eclipse, because I believe very strongly that if the Internet of Things is going to be successful, it's going to have to be open. So the more we make sure that the protocols and the frameworks and the developer tools that are being used to build the Internet of Things, the more we make sure that those are open, as in open source, the better it will be for everybody.
Okay, let's switch the topic now.
Okay.
Today is a special day because we are just some hours away from a new Eclipse release.
Yep, Eclipse Kepler.
So Eclipse Kepler is coming in a couple of hours, I think.
Yeah, well, so it'll be usually around noon on Wednesday, Eastern time, so say 6 p.m. tomorrow in Germany. And so Kepler this year is, by the numbers, it's so 71 projects are part of Kepler. 58 million lines of code, which is quite a substantial amount of code. There were 400 committers who worked on the Kepler release from 58 companies. So it's a worldwide effort, and it's been something that the Eclipse community takes a lot of pride in, is our ability to hit our release dates and be predictable. So it's something that we're very happy with. In terms of sort of highlights, so one is actually a project that's led by a team right here in Frankfurt, which is the Stardust project, which is a BPM tool set and runtime. So for people that are doing business process management, Stardust gives you a complete tool set for defining your workflows, and then also an execution engine for running your workflows, and all based on open source. And so it's actually quite a mature code base. It comes from a company called SunGuard. I can't remember. They acquired a company that was based here in Frankfurt. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, the original name. But that's based right here in Frankfurt. I think a couple of other projects that are worthy of note. I think in terms of goodness for Java developers, there's support in this release for the new Java EE7. which just shipped a few weeks ago. It's by far, at least to the best of my recollection, the quickest that we've been able to provide support for a new version of EE7 of Java EE. So we're pretty happy about that. And then the other thing I think that Java developers would be interested in is more support for doing Maven integration for the Web Tools projects. So for people that want to use Maven with Java EE, there's now support for building ER files, EJBs, WARs. So using the M2E to -WTP project is bringing that capabilities. I'm sure I'm forgetting others, but those are just a couple of the highlights coming in Kepler.
What about the basic core platform? So even Eclipse 4.3, I think.
Platform. In JDT and the core platform itself. Actually, a lot of it is I'm sure there's a long list. I've seen the new and noteworthy, but my memory's failing me. But definitely one of the things that for people that are using the Eclipse platform is important this release is they've now declared API for the Eclipse 4.x stream. So in 4.3, unlike last year's 4.2, there's now API. Now another thing, like a lot of developers quite rightly gave us grief last year because there were performance problems in 4.2. Those were mostly fixed in the second service release in SR2 back in February, but all those performance enhancements are in 4.3. So we certainly expect a much snappier, more performant experience for developers with Kepler.
Yeah, interesting. So some days or weeks ago, you had also around this Kepler release some interesting announcements regarding more the governance of Eclipse Foundation. For example, you introduced the contributor license agreement. What's the background or the reason for this change?
So all the changes. So we announced contributor license agreements, and we also announced starting the process to allow Eclipse projects to host at places like GitHub. So those are the two announcements, and both of those are part of an ongoing effort at Eclipse to make it easier to contribute to Eclipse, lowering the barriers to contribution, and providing the environments and tools that developers feel more comfortable with. And so the real reason why we did CLAs is because it makes it easier to do the workflows that developers find natural when they're using Git. So we switched, last year we switched all of Eclipse over to Git. I think we have 7 projects left on Subversion, but they're going to get told they have to switch too. So we're switching to Git. We're 97% there now, and so we want to get make it. Now that we switched to Git, we want to make sure that the workflows that people are using when they're working with Eclipse fit the sort of the Git way, if you will. And so CLAs make it easier to do things like signed off by. We'll be able to automate the workflow so that when somebody pushes a contribution to Garrett, that the CLA is checked right then. So we'll be able to automate those kind of workflows. Because what we were doing before was every single time somebody sent us a contribution, we would ask them the famous Eclipse 3 questions, right? And so if you have somebody who's wants to contribute 10 bug fixes, we're going to annoy him 10 times asking him the same 3 questions, which it's not very fun for anybody, right? So with the CLAs, all of those things can be automated. And now then the process of starting to move to GitHub is really about, there's millions of developers that use GitHub. The pull request has become the way that developers are getting used to sharing code. And so I think it's just, and we studied this for quite a while, make sure we were completely satisfied that we could do Eclipse projects the Eclipse way, including all of the intellectual property management, and host them at a place like GitHub or Bitbucket. And so we studied that quite carefully. We're confident that we can do that. So it just made sense. I mean, we were already, if you think about it, we've been mirroring projects, Eclipse projects on GitHub for quite some time. All we're really doing is flipping that arrow, right? If you think it used to go this way, now it's going this way. It's,
the other direction.
Yeah, so and the trademarks are still going to be owned by the Eclipse Foundation. The admin rights for those repositories on GitHub and Bitbucket will be owned by us. So we will have control over those repositories, and that made us feel comfortable that we could do this.
So the first project which is really using this new approach, I think, is the Vertex project, right?
Vertex, yeah.
So what is interesting here is that Vertex, really interesting framework, but a project that is not based on the original Eclipse source code platform based. Yeah. So it seems that more and more projects are coming to Eclipse, which are not really related. Let's say, starting with Orion or Chatty, those projects are coming to Eclipse, and it seems that Eclipse Foundation is coming a little bit more technology neutral. Is this a new direction?
Well, it's not new. We made that decision formally in 2011. So so when I did so if you go back to last year's Eclipse annual report, you'll see in there, like every year I write the annual report to the community, and there's always a section on sort of key decisions that were made in the last year. And back in 2011, there was a decision that the Eclipse Foundation is technology agnostic. So we have, I just demoed a project that's in Lua, right? And the last little while I've been demoing Orion a lot, which is all in JavaScript. So it's not so much, so we no longer feel that the Eclipse community is about Eclipse plugins per se. We think the core values for the Eclipse community are around our development process and the way that we bring projects on and make them part of the community, and the intellectual property management that we do to make sure that the technology that comes from Eclipse can be used successfully in commercial products, for example. So there's a lot more sort of rigor to that intellectual property management than you might see normally in an open source community, but that's one of our core values.
Do you think there's also a key difference, for example, to the Apache Foundation?
I think Eclipse and Apache have a lot more in common than we do. Than we have different. I think we're a little further ahead than they are right now in modernizing our infrastructure by embracing Git, by using Gerrit. On the other hand, they use Jira, and we still have Bugzilla. So I think a lot of it has to do with where do you want our intellectual property management process, or don't you? Do you do you feel comfortable in one community or the other? It really is a decision that projects have to make. There's if you read the original, there was a public thread in the process of Vertex coming to Eclipse, where the Vertex community asked, where should we go? And so the Eclipse was there, Apache was there, Outer Curve, and the Software Conservancy all said, this is how we do things, this is why you might want to consider doing it. And there was a few subtle things that that seemed to tip the balance in Eclipse's favor. One of them was that Eclipse projects have visible leaders, and Tim Fox is the leader of Vertex. And so that was something that that made sense to him. It's like, okay, if I go to Eclipse, I'm the leader.
You have this visibility,
and this
control.
You actually have responsibilities too, right? So you're responsible for ensuring that the IP process is followed and the development process is followed, and so on. So with great power comes great responsibility.
Okay. So coming back to the first question, these machine-to-machine projects, are they part of Eclipse Kepler, or what is planned there in the future?
So the Lua tools, the Kaneki project, and the Lua framework, Mahini, are part of the release train. They're part of Kepler. The But the PAHO project, the MQTT protocol that I was demonstrating, they still haven't shipped their 1.0 release, so they're still in incubation, so they're not part of Kepler. I mean, you can go to their website and download it. Actually, one of the cool things that's going on with PAHO is it started off, it had Java and C clients for MQTT, and in the last little while we've had a Python client contributed and a JavaScript client contributed. So we're seeing the community come forward with additional implementations of MQTT for other languages, which I think is great. So PAHO is becoming a polyglot project as well.
Okay, interesting. And also interesting, there's a new form of industry working group also gathering around this end-to-end technologies. What's going on here in this field?
So the concept of an Eclipse working group is basically to repeat the success of the Eclipse consortium model. So if you go back to the very beginnings of Eclipse, one of the things that at that time was novel about Eclipse was the notion of starting an open source project and marrying it with an industry consortium from the very beginning. Eclipse was one of the very first communities that ever did that. And
huge success.
Many exactly. Members. But we have over 190 members now at the Eclipse Foundation. So sometimes it can be hard to find other interested parties. So the idea of a working group is to find, from the Eclipse membership, a group of companies that is interested in a particular technology domain, and have them collaborate in helping promote and move forward the projects. So I think what I would say is what we've noticed is that open source projects are necessary but not sufficient for building platforms. You need to couple the technology side with companies that are committed to shipping products based on it, to helping market it and raise awareness amongst developers of the technology. And that's really what the working groups do, is they complement what's going on in the projects.
And the Eclipse Foundation is kind of a mediator, bringing together all the pieces.
So we have the M2M working group. We have the PolarSys working group, which is led by Airbus and is around building tool chains for safety critical software development, like avionics. And then we have the Location Tech working group, which is bringing projects that is yet another completely new area for Eclipse around location-aware technologies, so geospatial, geographic information systems, those kinds of things. So, so there's definitely some really interesting and cool new technologies coming in Eclipse.
Okay, great. So thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure, Tom.